Anyone that knows anything about Star Wars Kenner knows that with each film, a lot of the things were pulled over from each movie to the new line. But some things got moved over, and you didn't even know it. Welcome back to the Junk Room, everybody. It's me, the Junkman, coming back at you with another video. Before we get started, just to remind you, you become a YouTube member or a Patreon member. You get exclusive content every Sunday, or about every Sunday. I'm trying to get on a track here where I do an exclusive video just for Patreon, and I throw up other things throughout the time over there on Patreon or the YouTube member. Either one will get you the same access right there. Hey, honey, you know what I want for Christmas? I want to support the Junkman. And don't forget, there's another way to support the Junkman and get some cool stuff. JunkmanMerch.com. Get some shirts like these right there. Whoa! Man, that makes you want to go to church. Okay, let's talk about today's video. Now, we know when it comes to the figures at least, almost everything released like in Star Wars was crossed over to Empire Strikes Back. And then when Jedi came out, that stuff crossed over to Return of the Jedi. And it also happened to some of the ships. X-Wings were released in all the movies. Falcon, of course, was moved over. A lot of things were dropped, where Kenner just maybe felt they sold all they could. So by the time the next movie came out, they retired it. And then some moved over, and people really don't even remember that they moved over. They're like, that was released in an Empire Strikes Back box? I thought it'd be kind of fun to go through the ones I see most people don't know about. I know, we're having fun, right? So let's start at the beginning with the Star Wars items that crossed over to the other side, Empire Strikes Back. What's that, Larry?
They broke on through to the other side. They broke on through to the other side. Break on through, break on through, break on through to the other side.
Okay, Larry, we don't need all that, Larry. Sorry about that. Let's get this one out of the way, because I think I'm sick of talking about the troop transporter. A lot of people think of it as just being a Star Wars release, but if you watch my videos, because I've done like 4 videos on this thing, because it seems like there's always something to say about it. Anyway, the troop transporter got renamed and released 2 times in an Empire logo box. Here they are. As you know, it was renamed the Imperial Cruiser and released in the Empire Strikes Back box, but you could also buy it at Sears, now without sound, as a troop transporter, both in the Empire Strikes Back logo box. Now, one of the most iconic ships in Star Wars was the TIE Fighter, and a lot of people think, yeah, it was released in the Star Wars line, it was white, but then they released it in blue as battle damage for the Empire Strikes Back and going forward. But nope, the battle damaged TIE Fighter didn't hit the market until the Return of the Jedi line. So the TIE Fighter went from Star Wars to an Empire Strikes Back box. The same white ship. As you can see right here, this is the original release, not battle damage, not blue. The TIE Fighter crossed over to the Empire Strikes Back box. Now the TIE Fighter didn't get its battle damage until Return of the Jedi, but Luke Skywalker's X-Wing, or I just call it the X-Wing. I'll put anybody in there. I once put a hammerhead in an X-Wing. Whew, crazy times. But the X-Wing, it got the battle damage look in the Empire Strikes Back. Different paint job and the battle stickers. But the original white release from Star Wars, it did for a limited time get crossed over to the Empire Strikes Back line for about a year. As you can see, it was in 2 different boxes. One is called the red box. It just has the X-Wing with a red background. And then you have the Dagobah box. But these would both be in short run, as it will soon be updated to the battle damage. Now, I bet you knew that one. And I'm sure you knew about the Falcon going from Star Wars box to Empire box to Jedi box. But I threw this one in here because you might not have known this. When it first appeared in the Empire logo box, the photo was the same box from the 77 release with the little kid playing with the Falcon. But they quickly, about a year later, updated that to showing just figures standing around with the Falcon. So although it did get moved over to box, the actual box got moved over from Star Wars to Empire before they updated the look of the box. Now let's look at the Jawa ship, the RC Sandcrawler. Man, this is a holy grail. This is one I want back here so bad. They're just hard to find and they're very expensive when you do find them. And people mostly think of this as just a Star Wars toy, not something that crossed over to the Empire Strikes Back. But believe it or not, it did appear in an Empire Strikes Back box. Kinda. To find this in the Empire Strikes Back logo box, you had to live up north in Canada. Who knows, maybe Kevin Kupicheski bought this. Hey, that's the only kid I know from Canada. It seems like maybe Kenner has some of these left over in the warehouse, threw it in a Lego box, and sent it up to Canada. And they're pretty tough to find today. I mean, you can imagine the Sandcrawler itself is pretty hard to find, so to find one in the Empire box released only in Canada, that's almost impossible to find. And what about the Droid Factory? Now, I've talked about how they were going to update the Droid Factory for the Empire box, the Droid Factory 2. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's very interesting. It was going to come with a wind-up R2-D2. But they did take the Droid Factory from Star Wars and release it in the Empire Strikes Back box, again, for a very limited time. Again, it probably seems Kenner has some of these sticking around and just had to get rid of them, so they slapped them in the Empire Strikes Back box. And to find this one in the Empire logo, it's extremely rare. What about the iconic Darth Vader TIE Fighter? That's one you thought, it had to go from Star Wars to Empire to Jedi. I mean, it's Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. Well, apparently, I guess Kenner thought they sold all they could, or maybe it's because it doesn't appear in Empire or Jedi, that they didn't release it in the Empire box. Well, they didn't release it in the US. Because if you were a kid over in Spain, now this is the part of the video where I like to mention some actor that you hadn't thought of in years, but I don't know anyone that came from Spain. So we're just going to have to say kids in Spain got Darth Vader in the Empire Strikes Back logo box. Now that we looked at the things that went from Star Wars to Empire, let's look at the things that went from Empire to Return. What, Larry?
Break on through to the Empire to the Jedi box. Break on through to the other box. We're gonna break on through from the Empire to the Jedi box. Break on through.
We really don't need that, Larry. Sorry about that. Anyway, let's look at the things that went from the Empire box to the Return of the Jedi box that you might not have known about. And when you think of Snow, you think of Hoth. And when you think of Hoth, you think of a Scout Walker, or ATST, but the box says Scout Walker. Yes, first released in the Empire Strikes Back line. Really, a lot of people I know don't even think of this as being an Empire toy. They're like, that came out with Empire? But yes, it did. And yes, it's in the Empire Strikes Back. But it did cross over to Return of the Jedi. And for a limited time, it was released in the Empire box with just a Return of the Jedi logo. But then Kenner updated the box that has more of a Return of the Jedi look. Speaking of snow, what else is cold? A snow speeder. And did it cross over to Return of the Jedi? Yes, it did. Yes, it did. But just like some of the other ones we see here, it didn't move over to the Empire Strikes Back in the U.S. market. I bet there were some disappointed kids in the U.S. at Christmas. Oh, I wanted a snow speeder in the Return of the Jedi logo box. Well, sorry kids, can't have everything. What about the Rebel Troop Transporter, a ship that's kind of like a carrying case? I never had this thing, and maybe that's why I don't like it, because I never had it, so I can't attach any memories to it or something. I don't remember this thing as a kid. I don't remember wanting it. Never liked it. I do remember a kid that had it, but I didn't know he had it till years later, and it was under his house, you know, back when we used to go into the house and play. I don't know, we didn't have the internet back then, but we go into the house and play, and it would be all beat up and dirty. And I was like, what is that thing? And that's when I found out it was from Star Wars. But anyway, did it jump from Empire to Return of the Jedi? Yes, it did. And as you can tell by those two logos, it didn't get released in the U.S. market under the Return of the Jedi logo. But what about the figures? Are there any figures that went from like Star Wars to the Empire logo for a limited time? Not really. All the figures released under the Star Wars logo got released under Empire. All the Empire and Star Wars figures on that Empire logo moved over to the Return of the Jedi logo. And they would have eventually got around to Power of the Force if that line didn't get canceled in 1985. But a lot of people think when R2 and 3PO was released for the Empire line, they were updated. 3PO with the removable limbs and R2 with a sensor scope. But again, for a limited time, 3PO, R2 was released on the Empire Strikes Back card, released in their original form from the Star Wars films. Bet you didn't know. Sorry about that. Hello, this is Junkman, the Junk Room. May I help you?
Break on through to the other box. We're gonna break on through to the other box. Break on through.
Sorry about that. Now, what about the large-scale action figure line, or what some call the 12-inch line? We all know what crossed over here. Boba Fett. That was the only one to go from the Star Wars logo to the Empire Strikes Back logo. Of course, IGA-8 was released in the Empire logo, but it was never in a Star Wars logo. And the others from the Star Wars film, they never made it to release in the Empire box. Well, that's a look at things that went from each line that you may not have known about. Maybe I missed some. If I did, let me know in the comments below. Now again, I'm not trying to find the common ones that cross over. We all know that. Think of the ones that probably had a short, limited run when it did cross over. Well, I want to thank you for watching. As always, thumb up if you like my content, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk again soon.
Hey, Junkman channel popping though.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.